Chicago Bears got rid of their third most winning coach 13 years ago, but people are still talking about Lovie Smith in that era. This your boy, Barb Chair Scott, here to break it down to you with the truth about the entire Lovie Smith era. Now let's talk about Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith was hired in 2004 by the Chicago Bears after getting rid of their past coaches. Dave Wannstedt, Dick Duran, is they're looking for somebody to take them to a different level of glory. And during that time, Lovie Smith made the playoffs in 2 of his first 3 years. Now let's take a look at the stats that we have here for Lovie Smith, man. Lovie Smith, his career record in 9 seasons with the Chicago Bears was 81-63 regular season record, and as the third most winning Bears history behind, obviously, the founder of not just the Chicago Bears, but the founder of the NFL himself, Mr. George Halas, and number two behind the coach himself, Mike Ditka. He had a .563 winning percentage. He had 3 division titles and 1 NFC championship in 2006 with 2 NFC championship appearances. The other one came in 2010 and 1 Super Bowl appearance where they ended up losing 31-17 to the Indianapolis Colts in Super Bowl 41. Now, it's been 13 years since they got rid of Lovie, but there's still been a lot of discussion on should they have gotten rid of him. Things like that. They've had so many bad coaches since. You had the failed Mark Trestman experience. You had the John Fox experience. You had the instant highs of the Matt Nagy experience, and then the very bad lows after it. You had Matt Eberflus, which was nothing but bad, arguably the worst coach in history of this franchise. And then currently the new coach, Mr. Ben Johnson, who Bears fans are all hoping can lead this team to glory that they once had in the 80s and in prior years. Now, there's just a couple things I want to say about this. Now, what inspired this video was I saw Chicago Bears legend and Pro Football Hall of Famer Brian Urlacher on Johnny Football's podcast, and he said that the Bears should have never fired Lovie Smith, and it has been shit for them ever since. Now, this is a big sentiment that's been going around Bears fandom, I would say, for at least the last 5-6 years. There's been a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, a lot of revisionist history when it comes to his era. Now, I want to be very, very clear on something. Lovie Smith, like I just said, third most winning coach in the history of this franchise, second best coach if we're talking about modern era, so Super Bowl era or higher. He did some great things for this franchise. I mean, some of my best moments as a Bears fans came during that era. Who can ever forget the 2005 run, which nobody expected in Lovie's second year for them to make the playoffs. I think they went 11-5 that season, won the NFC North. Closing the Packers out on Christmas to do it. And making it to the playoffs. Now, that playoff game is one of the most humiliating playoff games as a Bears fan. Of course, Steve Smith had like 3 touchdowns in that game, all over Charles Tillman in that game. But then the next year, coming out 13-3, Devin Hester rookie season, Rex Grossman actually looking good for periods of the season. One of the best defenses, in my opinion, the second best defense I've seen in the history of this franchise. Was just great with Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Peanut Tillman, Tommy Harris, Hunter Hellenmeyer, all those guys. The last time the Bears had an actual functioning offensive line, with Olin Kreutz, Roberto Garza, Reuben Brown, all of those guys. Robbie Gould, I'll never forget the overtime field goal win that sent that team to the NFC Championship game in the divisional round against Seattle. And then the NFC Championship game, which is the peak of my Bears fandom, blowing out the high-powered New Orleans Saints. Well, I think it was like 41-10 or some shit like that, and going on to the franchise's second Super Bowl appearance, and my first Super Bowl appearance as a Bears fan, because I was not alive in 1985. I know a lot of y'all like to call me Unc, my younger Twitter followers and things like that. I was born in 88. That was 3 years before I was born. So I do not remember anything of 88 outside of from what my pops like to tell me about his Super Bowl party, how great it was. But then the Super Bowl 41. I honestly can't look at the Devin Hester kickback. Everybody looks at it as this some great moment in Bears history. If the game ended, if that night ended much better, then yeah, I probably could. But every time I see that kick, I just think about how miserable I felt towards the end of that game. It has been almost 20 years almost 20 years since Super Bowl 41, and I have still not got over it. So that was the high point. That was a high point. Then you had the 2007 season where they were 7-9. Then you had the 2008 season where I think they were like 8-8 or something like that. 2009 they finally traded for a quarterback. You get Jay Cutler in here, but they were bad. 2010 was the year that you thought, okay, maybe this is turning around. You finished 12-4. You win the NFC North. You knock out your most hated rival at the time. That is Brett Favre. You put him into retirement. And, you had Devin Hester's comeback season. Everybody thought he was dead. He didn't have a kickoff return in 3 seasons up to that point. And you make it all the way up to the NFC Championship game, but you lose to your most hated rival because your quarterback got hurt. And, the thing about that, a lot of people, even to this day, like to bash Jay for that. I don't. Wasn't Jay's fault. Like, you can't fault somebody who has diabetes, to deal with stuff like that to come back in the game because of, future complications. So I feel like a lot of that hate was unnecessary. But then you come in 2011, you start 7-3. Granted, Jay Cutler did get hurt, but only winning one game for the rest of the season is inexcusable. And I think of things that a lot of Bears fans forget is just how bad those last 6 seasons were. He missed the playoffs 5 of the last 6 seasons that he was the head coach of the Chicago Bears. On top of that, his last season, everybody keeps saying, oh, they were 10-6. They were 10-6. They were 10-6. Yeah, tell me what 10-6 got you that season. 3rd in the NFC North, and to the point that you needed your most hated rival to beat the Minnesota Vikings just to give yourself a chance to get in. There's just multiple things that happen that I feel like we need to stop having revisionist history on. Now, I'm not saying that Lovie Smith was a bad coach. He was not a bad coach, but I think what we need to understand, firing him was not the problem. Who you replaced him with was the problem. The problem was getting the guy from the Canadian League who didn't know what the hell he was doing in Mark Trestman to replace him was the issue. Then you go out there, you get a veteran head coach in John Fox who's been to Super Bowls, but then when he tells you he wants a quarterback in Deshaun Watson, you don't give him that. You go out there and you give him somebody that nobody's heard before in Mitchell Trubisky, and that ruins the next couple of years. We can go on and on and on about the problems with this franchise since Lovie left. And I'm not saying this is a Lovie problem. I'm saying let's not act like Lovie was something that he wasn't to justify where you are right now. And after a while, man, sometimes the locker room just needs a new voice. We can look at it at other situations with other coaches in Chicago sports. Tom Thibodeau, prime example, not just with the Bulls, but also with the New York Knicks. He can only get you so far. So firing Tom Thibodeau was not the issue. Replacing him with Fred Hoiberg was the issue. Go to the Chicago White Sox. Firing Ozzie Guillen was not the issue. Replacing him with Robin Ventura, who has never coached a day in his life, was the issue. Even look what the New York Knicks are doing. If they don't replace Tom Thibodeau with a better head coach, they're going to be in the same cycle. And one thing I'm really, really tired of, and this is like no disrespect to the 2005, 2006 era Chicago Bears, but I really need y'all to stop talking like y'all was the 85 team. And, honestly, they were great players. There was a lot of Hall of Fame players on that team, and maybe some who probably should be in the Hall of Fame. But then you get them coming on here on these platforms, talking down the fans, talking down the current players on the team, like they won something. You know what I'm saying? If you walk around with NFC Championship ring, my nigga, I need you to get some shame. That is a problem that we see as well. And, I will give Bronner like credit on the podcast. He did give some credit to this new Bears team, and he does feel that Caleb is a quarterback and that Ben Johnson is a quarterback is a coach to lead him into the future. But we ain't got to have revisionist history on an era that didn't result in jewelry. It's the same thing with the Bulls. People have so much fond eras of the Derrick Rose, Tom Thibodeau era. Did that result in a 7th NBA championship trophy? No, the fuck it did not. Now, that doesn't mean you don't enjoy those times. I have fond memories of those times. I just told you the fun I had during those first couple of years of the Lovie Smith era. And we all know that 2010-2011 season with the Chicago Bulls, when D Rose won MVP, was amazing as well. But we don't have to put it on some upper echelon thing to justify where it's at. Send your hate to the front offices. You know what I'm saying? Send the hate in front offices and say this was the mistake that was made. Not think that the coach that was hired was wrongfully fired. Lovie Smith was coach for 9 seasons. He was coach for almost a decade. He had a long time. It's not like he got fired after 06. He just had back-to-back NFC North championships and making it to the NFC championship. Well, it's not like he even got fired after 2010. He had 2 more seasons after that. And I think we forget about the archaic cover 2 defense that he was running. I think we forget about the terrible offense and the different offensive coordinators he was bringing in. Now, granted, that's Chicago Bears' problem as well. But I want us to direct our anger and not just our anger, but our realism in the right direction. Lovie Smith was a good coach. Fun era for the Chicago Bears. Top 3 era, granted, the bar is in hell. This is not a franchise that is full of winning, at least in the Super Bowl era. I know the Green Bay Packers like to go around and call themselves Title Town because they won all those NFL championships before we had segregated bathrooms. If they're Title Town, then the Bears are Title Town too. Because George Halas won 6 NFL championships if you want to do that. We're talking Super Bowl era. The Bears do not have a long period of winning that you can just expect them to be on some great level. So let's just keep it how it is. Lovie Smith was a good coach, but his time was over, and the problem was who they replaced it with, man.